Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ijoma Ndubisi Juliet. The topic of my presentation is express co-ownership. Definition of express co-ownership. Express co-ownership is when two or more people hold an interest in land at the same time. The interests of the parties are said to be concurrent, which means that they all hold interest in the land concurrently rather than successfully, which is when interests are held one after the other. The express co-ownership occurs when the land is conveyed to two or more people by an express act. Example of express co-ownership is where Parker's space is expressly sold to Moses and Kenren, where both Moses and Kenren will own an interest in it at the same time. These are examples of express co-ownership, where the land has been expressly conveyed to two or more people. This is different from implied co-ownership, where co-ownership is implied from the behavior of the parties. Another thing is how do co-owners hold land? There are two means of co-ownership. First, the joint tenancy. The second, the tenancy in common. Let's talk about the joint tenancy. In a joint tenancy, the co-owners who are called tenants hold as joint tenants. This means that they hold the land as in unity and do not have separate individual shares in the land. Each of them owns the whole of the land. The main feature of the joint tenancy is the presence of the four units. These are requirements that shows that the land is held jointly. You can easily remember them by the acronym PITT. They mean unity of possession, interest, time, and title. To prove to the court that joint tenancy exists, you must prove PITT by saying that the land was in the possession of all parties, with all having same interest at the same time by holding the title. Survivorship. The effect of the parties holding as joint tenants in a joint tenancy relationship is the rule of survivorship. The principle of survivorship states that if any of the joint tenant dies, his or her interests automatically pass to the other joint tenants. Where both joint tenants died together in a circumstances where it is impossible to determine which one died first, it is presumed that the eldest died first, and thus the property will form the estate of the youngest under section 184 Law of Property Act 1925. As they do not have individual interest to call their own, if any one of them dies, their interest in the land simply dissolve to the other joint tenant who will continue holding the land in joint tenancy. The question that most people ask is if the family member of the joint tenant that died can claim his or her interest in the land. The simple answer to this question is that it is not possible to transfer the interest to the family due to the survivorship principle. As the joint tenants does not hold individual interest in the land, and as such have nothing to leave either in their wills. It has been argued severally that the survivorship rule is unfair, as the person who survived the longest end up owning the land, which I agree with to some extent. Which brings us to the tenancy in common. Unlike a joint tenancy, in tenancy in common, each tenant hold their individual share in the land. A tenancy in common requires only the unit of possession. That is, all the tenants have a right to possess all the land. This means that the other three units do not have to be satisfied. So a tenant in common can obtain his or her interest at a different time from everyone else. He can also have a difference, and he also does not have to receive his interest in the same way from the same document as the other tenant in common, as all the parties have the right to possess the whole of the land. The land is co-owned. No individual has his or her own individual part of the land, which would imply sole ownership rather than co-ownership. Also, the fact that the tenants have different shares does not literally mean the land is divided up. The advantage of tenancy in common is the right of the tenant to leave his or her interest in the land in his or her will, or it can pass under the rule of intestacy. The legal title. In order to sell land, everyone on the legal title must sign the conveyance, the deed of sales. Before the 1926, it was possible for people to hold the legal title to land as tenants in common. Remember that tenants in common have their own individual shares, which they can do with as they wish. So in a situation where some of the tenants in common had transferred their shares to two persons under which increases the number of the tenants, they will all have to sign the deed before the land could be conveyed to another buyer. However, since the encroachment of the 1925 Act, co-ownership of legal title can only be through a joint tenancy. The Act limits number of joint tenants that can hold a legal title of a land to 4. Where a conveyance seeks to convey legal title to more than 4 persons, the first 4 names are taken to be the legal owners. Section 34 Trustee Act 1925. For example, if Packer space is conveyed to A, B, C, D, E, and F, the parties A, B, C, D will hold the legal title as joint tenants, and they will hold the equitable interest as joint tenants for themselves and E and F. Severance. Severance is the act of conveying a joint Severance is the act of converting a joint tenancy into a tenancy in common. Why would you want to sever? First, because of the lottery effect of the right of survivorship. People who start off by holding as joint tenants may subsequently decide that they want to hold their own individual interest in the property as a tenant in common. They might want to be able to leave their interest in a will. The way of achieving this is through severance. If any of them wishes to hold his equitable interest as a tenant in common, he may sever it from the whole by a recognized means. Why would they want to do this? Imagine that B decides he wants to emigrate. He no longer wishes to live in Packer space and would rather use his share of the money he contributed to buy a property abroad. The other refused to sell just for him to get his share back. One option is for B to sell his equitable interest to Raj. The act of selling B's equitable interest in the joint tenancy, therefore, his interest in the joint tenancy will be conveyed to Raj, and B will be happy as he has his own money and Raj will have a place to live. The two means of severance can be found under Section 36, subsection 2 of the Law of Property Act 1925. This involves a notice in writing sent by one tenant to all other tenants, stating that he or she wishes to hold his interest as a tenant in common. What happens if the other don't receive it? If it's registered or sent by a record delivery to the person or people upon whom it's being served, and not returned by the post office, it is deemed to have been delivered under Section 196, subsection 4 of the Law of Property Act 1925. In Re 88, Berkeley Road, NW9, 1971, Ms. Godwin served notice of severance by record delivery. Ms. Godwin herself signed the receipt for the record delivery because Ms. Elbridge was away at the time. Although Ms. Elbridge never actually saw the notice and died soon after, the notice was held to be effective for severance to have occurred. The notice does not need the consent of the other joint tenant for the severance to be effective. Statutory notice is totally unilateral. It's totally a unilateral act of severance. In the case of Williams and Hensman, 1861, Prior to the 1925 Act, Williams and Hensman provide another method of severance which were allowed by the 1925 Act. These methods are: 1. A person acting on his own share. 2. Mutual agreement. 3. Mutual conduct. The question here is, what happens when one joint tenant kills another joint tenant? If one joint tenant kills another joint tenant, on one hand, the survivorship principle will apply. On the other hand, you are not allowed to profit from a crime you committed under the forfeiture rule. Under the forfeiture rule, you will have to forfeit any profit you had made from crime. In conclusion, by the means of making a summary to everything I have said, severance is done in order to convert a joint tenancy to tenancy in common, thus avoiding the right of survivorship. The legal title must be held in joint tenancy. Severance of the legal title is not possible. However, if any of the parties dies, the right of survivorship will operate on the legal title. Lastly, there can be severance of the equitable title only by the means of section 36, subsection 2, or by the method given in Williams and Hensman. Therefore, the question would be whether any of the parties has carried out an act which might constitute severance. Thank you.